Welcome back to the channel, Adventures Through Climate Change, with your host, Trevor Snyder. Thanks for coming in today. And if you haven't watched this channel before, we're just talking about climate change, what's happening with it. We're trying to learn from all the experts, whether they're experts or not. They make videos on stuff. And we just sit here and watch videos. We'll read reports if we need to. I don't upload as many of the videos that I read reports because I've noticed that I'm only so entertaining and they're only so entertaining, and videos are so entertaining. So today, you guys know I kind of get into themes right now. I'm trying to figure out what the next energy source is. And so we just watched a video on hydrogen. I think I watched one side that I somewhat agree with, even though it didn't get into that much depth into it. This one comes from DW Planet A, which I don't tend to agree with because they're climate change fanatics typically. But I'm subscribed, and they make entertaining videos. I do like to learn their side. I do want to I want to get both sides and figure out what the heck's going on. So let's listen to them and see what they have to say. I don't know if they're going to be fans of hydrogen. I don't know. Let's see.
We really have to talk about the big buzzword in the world of energy.
Hydrogen.
Take hydrogen.
Let's keep the CCs on.
Of hydrogen.
It's the magic fuel that can power our cars, trucks, trains, ships and planes. We can even make steel with it, and the best thing...
The only byproduct of consuming that fuel is water again and the energy that comes with it.
This all sounds great. Maybe just a little too great? Let's take a closer look and see what's behind the hype around hydrogen.
But first off, if you're like me and have a bit of trouble remembering what went down in chemistry class, let's start with the basics.
It's the first
Hydrogen
element.
sits at the very top of the periodic table. It's the most abundant element in the universe that can even be found in our sun and stars. It's a very clingy gas though, so you'll usually find it bound up with other elements, for example with oxygen in water. If we want to get pure hydrogen, we have to split up these bonds. And a simple way to do this is called electrolysis. All you have to do is put some baking soda into water. This will help with conductivity. When you pass a current through the solution, bubbles form along the wires. This is water splitting up into hydrogen and oxygen. There should be twice as much hydrogen as oxygen released, because water, so H2O, is made up of 2 hydrogen but only 1 oxygen atom.
There are 2 ways to unlock energy from the hydrogen that's coming out here. Firstly, it's flammable, so you could just burn it. And secondly, you could use it to power what's called a fuel cell.
These essentially work like a battery running on hydrogen and oxygen. They react to supply electricity that could, for example, power a car. The only byproducts are heat and water. And all this is not really news. The fuel cell was invented back in the 1800s. Later in the same century, a guy in Denmark called Paul Lacour was already using windmills to power electrolysis that supplied hydrogen for his school's gas lamps. And in the 1960s, General Motors built a fuel cell powered van that ran on hydrogen. Today, almost all the hydrogen we produce is used to make other things like fertilizer or petroleum, but it's never made it big as a fuel. It's just always been easier and cheaper to directly burn fossil fuels instead, but that is changing. As the world is slowly waking up to the climate crisis, companies and entire countries are committing to not only reduce emissions, but to reach
Net zero.
Zero emission.
Net zero.
This is Meredith Annex. She's the lead hydrogen analyst at Bloomberg NEF, a market research firm.
But with net zero, everyone has to do something. And that means that you need solutions for areas where electricity is going to struggle to provide the solution. And that's where we see the sweet spot for hydrogen.
Take the steel industry. It uses lots of energy and is responsible for around 8% of global CO2 emissions. It was long thought that only fossil fuels could power the chemical reactions needed to turn iron ore into steel, but hydrogen can get the job done as well, while also being clean burning, so only leaving behind water. Swedish company SSAB said it produced the first fossil-free steel in 2021. Other steel makers are working on similar technologies, which they claim will be market ready as soon as the middle of the decade. And then we can use hydrogen to clean up heavy transport. A study showed that pretty much all container ships going from China to the US could run on hydrogen fuel cells. They might only have to reduce cargo space by some 5% or at a refueling stop. While there are no hydrogen-powered ships traversing the oceans yet, there are some promising pilot projects.
Would they have 3 byproducts? The hydrogen, the oxygen, and the salt? I mean, would they be burning this stuff, or is it like, are they able to pull it up, or is that something where they got to separate the water? So, and that's pretty cool, though. That is cool.
The same goes for aviation. In 2020, the first commercial-sized hydrogen-powered plane took off. And
Called it the
major aircraft
Hindenburg.
manufacturer Airbus is working on 3 hydrogen models that it says might be ready to deploy as soon as 2035. Long-haul flights will probably be a challenge, but a new study estimates that even running short and medium-haul flights on hydrogen could cut aviation emissions by up to 1/3.
Wow.
This very simple element can actually solve a very complicated problem. It can help cut emissions in some of our most polluting sectors. So we're going to need a lot more of the stuff.
And this is where the whole thing gets a little bit tricky, because not all hydrogen is created equal. In fact, there's a whole rainbow of different ways to make the stuff.
The vast majority, almost 90% of all hydrogen that's produced today, is what's called grey hydrogen, made from fossil fuels, mainly natural gas. Making the fuel of the future that's supposedly so green is actually a pretty dirty business.
Ooh.
If we want to use hydrogen as a clean fuel, we first need to clean up its production. And there are 2 main ways to go about this, the first one being blue hydrogen.
When we're talking
Water?
about blue hydrogen, we're referring to fossil fuels with carbon capture and storage.
This means we still make hydrogen from natural gas in a process called steam methane reforming. That does produce CO2, but instead of letting these emissions escape into the atmosphere, producers claim they can catch them and then store them underground or turn them into materials we can use for other purposes.
Sounds pretty great, right? And it would be if it worked.
Blue hydrogen actually has a very, very large greenhouse gas footprint.
This is Robert Howarth, who co-authored a study that made quite a splash in the energy world.
Turns out that the greenhouse gas footprint of the blue hydrogen is worse than if you simply burned the natural gas directly for fuel instead. Nothing low emissions about it at all.
The oil and gas industry often promises to be able to remove around 90% of emissions when making blue hydrogen. But the reality looks different. Human rights NGO Global Witness calculated that this blue hydrogen facility in Canada, run by Shell, only manages to catch around half the emissions it creates.
Less than.
And this gets even worse when you take into account leaks along the supply chain while the gas is processed and transported. These release methane into the atmosphere, a greenhouse gas that in the short term is more than 80 times more powerful in warming the planet than CO2.
80 times.
But despite this, blue hydrogen made its way into the official hydrogen strategies of major economies like the UK, the US, Japan, and the European Union. Reports show that there were some pretty serious lobbying efforts behind that.
It's a direct strategy of the oil and gas industry, quite frankly. But again, the science doesn't support it. It's pure marketing. And it's marketing. The goal, let's be frank, is to keep selling fossil fuels to the world while pretending it's going to get better.
We wanted to hear what the oil and gas industry had to say about this.
I will say
we
that's
put these
most of-
criticisms to the Hydrogen Council.
That
And
seems to be most of climate change is that, or at least solutions are mainly from people that just want to make money off it. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. And whether it be the fossil fuel industry or whoever, that just seems to be the way it is.
an industry group
It's
which counts
exploited.
fossil fuel giants
That's the
like
word I was looking
BP,
for.
Shell, and Saudi Aramco among its steering members. Unfortunately, they said they didn't find the time to respond.
I think blue hydrogen is a mistake that will cost us a lot in the future.
This is Chris Jackson, who founded Protium, a UK company that focuses on green hydrogen.
But I don't believe that the way we resolve that is by arguing about it. I think it's about building better projects and better technologies. And that's what we want to do with green hydrogen.
I'm with him.
To make green hydrogen, you simply use renewable energy from sources like wind or solar to power an
That's what I was saying at the
electrolysis
beginning
on
of
a
the video.
much larger scale than this, of course. This produces no emissions, so you end up with truly clean hydrogen.
Whoa, 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 whoa. We literally just watched the videos on wind and what it takes to build one of those, maintain them, service them. They have to produce. They have to produce. And then at the end of their years, they only have 15 to 25 year lifespan. What do you do with them? Because they're huge. Very few places are repurposing those parts right now. And then what it takes to build them again, right? And a lot of them are like composite type materials that we're using fossil fuels to build. We're almost like a net. We're maybe in a little net positive in that, right? Okay, so when you say we're going to use, wind turbines and stuff, be careful. Okay, we're not that good yet at making wind turbines to the point where we're not requiring all those fossil fuels to build them. Okay, I just wanted to point that out. Whoa.
Today, only a tiny fraction of hydrogen is green, and it's actually still pretty expensive compared to the other forms. But that is set to change for two reasons. One,
electrolyzers are getting cheaper because we're moving to larger projects with more upscaled manufacturing. So that's the biggest thing.
And two, prices for renewables have fallen consistently and continue to do so. Bloomberg NEF predicts that green hydrogen will be cheaper than blue hydrogen by around 2030 and cheaper than grey hydrogen by 2050.
so is that it? Problem solved. We just make tons and tons of green hydrogen and then run our entire economies on it. Well, unfortunately, it's not that simple.
One big challenge that remains is hydrogen's relatively low energy density. You need about 3 times more space to store the same amount of punch compared to natural gas. So we'll likely have to build a lot of new storage facilities depending on how much hydrogen we'll actually need. And how much that's going to be is a tricky question.
Renewable electricity is still a scarce, precious resource, and we should use it as effectively and as efficiently as we can, and hydrogen may not be the best way to do that.
Hydrogen can be used for everything, but that doesn't mean it should. So the future is finding the balance between what we use the battery and what we use the hydrogen.
Passenger cars are a great example for this. They can run on hydrogen fuel cells, but turning electricity into hydrogen, transporting it to refueling stations, pumping it into a fuel cell to then convert it back to electricity is just not very efficient. About 60% of the energy you put in gets lost along the way. Alternatively, you could just use the same energy to directly charge a lithium-ion battery that powers an electric motor. Here, only 20% of the energy gets lost. With trucks, it's a slightly different story. It was long believed that batteries weren't going to work here. To move heavy trucks, you'd need loads of them, which take up valuable cargo space, and long charging times aren't really great for business either. But it seems this technology race isn't over yet. Batteries are becoming more powerful and charging times are going down, so much so that this recent study points towards battery electric trucks dominating the market in the future. Hydrogen is by no means the silver bullet that will help with everything, but it does make sense in some cases. So where do we go from here?
We're really
sorry, I didn't mean to
at
interrupt
the
him.
point at which now a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of momentum has been built around hydrogen. And 2022 and through to 2026 are really the years where we now need to demonstrate that momentum is converting into real assets and real production of green hydrogen.
And in that regard, green hydrogen has long had a chicken and egg problem. How do you grow supply when demand isn't growing and vice versa?
I think demand will grow, and I'll let him finish off in just 1 second, which he'll probably just talk about, some ad or something. But anyways, I do think there's a spot for hydrogen. I think there's a spot for batteries. I think there's a spot for fossil fuels, and I think there's a spot for coal, and there's a spot for burning wood, to the people that need that. I think there's a spot for all of them, and I think the technologies just need to get better in each one. And that's my 2 cents on that. And hydrogen always seemed very appealing to me, even when I was a kid. I loved the Hindenburg story. I just thought that hydrogen, it just seemed like such a way to go. I mean, it's so flammable and whatnot. And when you're thinking of sparks and whatnot, why wouldn't you want like pretty much the most flammable there is? It just you have to go about the safety measures to get there. And I think it's coming. But I'll be interested to see what you guys have to say too, because obviously,
but as governments around the world start investing, this might start to change. It's predicted that hydrogen could supply up to 20% of our energy needs by 2050, up from pretty much zero today. But that's just the most optimistic scenario.
All of that needs to play out this decade. And if we don't see that this decade, then we're really going to be struggling to hit climate goals overall.
So now is the time for hydrogen to prove that it can really get as big as its hype.
And what do you think? Is hydrogen the fuel of the future, or should we focus on other alternatives instead? Let us know in the comments and hit subscribe for more videos on the climate and the environment. We have a new one for you every Friday.
Oh, my dog's barking. Delivery driver. Probably hear my dog's barking. I apologize. Let's to talk about what is going on exactly. Let me get this back. Oh, there I am. I think that hydrogen is gonna find its way to some degree, but it seems like they're all competing, but they all work somewhat together. They all use some sort of fossil fuels. They all need some sort of spark, like electric device. They need all of them need electricity to work. They need some sort of battery storage. It's like every single one, they're going against each other and saying that's the wrong one. And then it needs it. It uses it. And I'm just like, okay, well, I think these competing fields, that guy is a hydrogen guy. He was talking, and if he can develop his scientific theories, and then it's going to move forward. It's going to advance, and vice versa with every single category of energy. Right? It's the energy sector is broad, and it's a good thing. We got a bunch of different people thinking about different areas, and it would be nice to diversify our energy, because we saw like down in Texas, what was it, a couple years ago, when their whole grid went down for like 3, 4, 5 days. And what happened was it's not used to getting that cold down there. It froze the gas pipes, right? And so the gas pipes got frozen. It stopped there. It was so cold they couldn't run the wind turbines, and they weren't getting much out of the solar system. And so they just people died that winter. It was horrible, right? And but we saw that it took basically everything to get it back on, right? And I think we need to take that approach. We need to stop demonizing everything and look at, hey, you know what? There's a time and place and spot for every little thing. And it might, that scientific breakthrough might lead us to another different scientific breakthrough. And we can't stop that. So we need to look at all of it. We need to digest everything. We need to have a bunch of people looking at a bunch of different things, and we need to talk about it. We need to be able to talk about it. Okay. Have conversations. So with that being said, I hope I earn your subscription today or tomorrow or someday in between. And I hope you enjoyed the video. I would love to hear your 2 cents about the future of what we're doing, where we're driving, climate change, whatever you want to talk about. Lay down the comment, tell me what to watch, and I hope to catch you on the next video.